Okay, welcome again to another lesson. I believe this to be the final lesson, right, in this course. So, we are going to be talking about a new topic. I believe this is going to be the last topic for this course in that program. So, we are looking at exception handling. All right, exception handling. I know I've mentioned exceptions before, and I say that exception, when you talk about an exception, it simply refers to an error or a malfunction in your code, right? And that malfunction could actually be either in your code or from the server. That's in if you're making a network request, right? The server from the server with which you're interacting with your program, with your the server which your that program is interacting with could have or could develop some issues, right? Some faults. Maybe your server could go down or could crash or something like that, and your code, your API requests might come back with an exception. All right. So this just letting you know that something is wrong somewhere. Okay. So an exception is an error that occurs while your program is running. Yeah. Common causes could be network failure, invalid user inputs, division by zero, null values, file or API errors, and if not handled, exceptions can crash your apps. Alright. If not handled, your app could crash from the exception. So types of errors in that: compile time errors, which are detected before running your code. For example, this is an example of a compile time error. All right, if you declare an integer variable and you assign a string to it, for example, all right, it's going to give you this error. All right, it's going to let you know that you're doing something wrong. It says a value of type string can't be assigned to a variable of type int. All right, so this is as compile time. Compile time simply refers to when you're still writing your code before your code runs. All right, the errors that you get, during development, during development, when you're still writing your code, are compile time errors. But errors that show up when your code is running already are known as runtime errors. All right, so these are errors that occur when your code is already running, and this is an example. All right, this is an example. So right now, if I paste this here, right, I'm not going to get any red line error here. Okay, I'm not going to get any red lines here. It looks okay, but by the time I run it, I'm going to have an exception. All right, so what is it saying? Integer division by zero exception. So this is actually a division operator. All right, that does not it does not return a double. How do I mean? If I say 10 divided by 3, we know that 10 divided by 3 is 3 remainder 1. All right, 3 remainder 1. Or if I were to do a normal division here, let me change this to double. If I were to do a normal division here, I'll get 3.3, I believe. Okay, 3.333. all right, so that's the result of a normal division operation. But if I were to use this operator, this division operator, okay, what I'm going to have is 3. I'm not going to have this decimal part, right? Just 3. Okay, just 3. So there's a rule that you cannot perform truncating division by 0. Okay, you cannot divide any number by 0 like this. All right, so that is that's a rule. Okay, so if you try to do it, you're going to have a runtime error. Now you can see I'm running my code now. All right, and this error is showing up at runtime. Runtime is when my code is already running. You understand? So that is what this is. Okay, so these are the 2 types of errors. So let's look at basic try catch. Yeah, basic try catch. So this try catch is used to handle exceptions safely. All right, so you can handle exceptions, especially runtime exceptions like this. You can safely handle it. Okay, so that your code will not crash. As you can see now, when I had this, right, my code actually crashed here because this I wasn't able to, this operation was not able to execute because of what happened here. Right? As you can see, it wasn't printed. This data loaded was not printed because of this. Okay, so exceptions can actually crash your app. Right? If you build an app and in the code you wrote to build that app, if you did not handle exceptions properly, the app will crash. All right, you have problems. So that's why we have exception handling. Okay, that's why we have exception handling. Right, so we have an example here. Let me let me create a new file. All right, so I would like to copy this. Let me just copy what I have here. Right, and place here. So let me move. So I just want to have a simple print statement here. All right, a simple print statement. So if I run this code, you can see that I have an unhandled exception, and due to that my code actually crashed. Okay, what came after this was not able to execute. So what I can do is I can wrap it in a try catch block. Okay, and this is what a try catch block means. This is what a try catch block looks like. I'll write try, open a curly brackets, and then at the end of it I'll write catch. Okay, and then here I can define whatever I want to define this as. Right, so let me just use E for exception. All right, and then I can print the exception that is going to come from this code. Okay, so what I just did is I wrapped this inside a try and catch block. All right, so if this operation fails, instead of having this unhandled exception which is going to crash my app, right, I'll just catch it. And then I can display it somewhere. All right, I can say exception occurred, or I can say failed with exception. And then interpolate whatever message is going to come from this problem, this code. All right. So if I run it, you will see that I have properly handled the exception. All right, and I'm able to even print it failed with exception, and then this is the exception. Now, as you can see, it is now properly handled. All right, it is properly handled now. So this is the problem I'm having: integer division by 0 exception. Okay, and then my code actually still executed. All right, so that is it about that is basically what exception handling entails. Caching specific exceptions. So you can actually specify what type of exception this is. All right, you can say on this is integer division by 0 exception. All right, on integer division by 0 exception catch. Okay, and then you still have your exception handled, but I'm having this one in here that it says integer division by 0 exception is deprecated. In other words, it's outdated. This is outdated because that regularly undergoes upgrades, right? The that SDK undergoes regular upgrade. So in previous versions of that we used this, right? But now it is saying that this is deprecated. In other words, it is outdated. It still works, but it is outdated, right? So it shouldn't be used. Instead, we should use unsupported error. So I'm going to use unsupported error instead, right? So this is the type of the exception, right, that we have right here. Okay, so you can specify the type of exception if you want, right? Or you could just leave it as catch. I believe this is simpler. Yeah. So it makes our code more precise and displays better error messages, unlike all those confusing errors that we had. All right, we are now able to display better error messages. Okay, so we have the finally block. So we have the finally block. All right, so this is just a piece of code that runs whenever this process is completed. All right, so whether this results in an exception or not is going to run, right, whether it fails or not. So this is finally, and then we can say cleanup done. All right, so whether it fails or not, this is going to be printed after this try catch block executes. All right, so either way it is going to run. Okay, so throwing exceptions, you can manually throw exceptions. All right, okay, so this is how it happens. Undo the exception. No, this is not. Hold on. Okay, this is not where we throw exceptions. All right, this is not where we throw. Okay, so if we have a function, for example, a function for withdrawing, for withdrawing an amount from a bank, all right, and I call this function withdraw, and then instead of a double, let me change this to dynamic. Okay, no, but let me use dynamic, yeah, and then I'll say if amount is not a number. Okay, so normally I'm supposed to enter a number, either int or double, right, in here. Okay, but if I now maybe enter a string instead, okay, I'm going to have an exception thrown to me. Now it's not going to be printed there. Okay, it's going to be thrown to the user. In other words, it's going to be displayed to the user. Right, invalid amount. Okay, so that is what this throw does. But then if I used a try catch block, so execute this, I can actually print the exception. All right, let me copy this the way it is. Okay, and use minus 100. So if it is less than 0, I'll have this exception. Now I'm printing it. All right, I'm throwing an exception from this. In other words, I'm making this. What this also does is that it's you can use it to throw an exception from your operation in case uh, in case a condition is not met. All right, the condition here is that the amount must be the condition here is that the amount must be less than or equal to 0. All right, so this is how exceptions are made, like this. Okay, so in case the amount is less than or equal to 0, you can throw an exception, or just like in the previous example I had, if the amount is not a number, right, I should be able to throw an exception. Let me go here and enable my extension. So I want to find out why this exception is not being thrown. Okay. Why is the invalid amount exception not being printed? Okay, if amount is not num, now I put my not operator in the wrong place. Okay, if it is not num, no, this throws an exception when the amount is a num type. However, you're passing 1000 is string, which is not a num. It's not operator. Okay, this is where it should be. Alright, so that is why I was having that problem. Okay, now my exception is being thrown. Alright, so remember what this operator is. Okay, this it checks if what it's doing right here is it checks if the amount I'm passing, right, is not a number. So if it is not a number, right, I'm going to have this exception thrown from this function. But if it is a number, like 200, okay, I won't have it thrown. Alright, so I can actually also do a check here. If it's not a number and amount is greater than 0, in other words, it is, and okay, in other words, amount must be a positive amount, right, not a negative amount. So if it's a negative amount, I will have my exception also thrown. I'll also have my exception thrown. Less than. Okay, I have to find out why this is again. If it is not a number, or okay, I should use the or operator here. Alright, so I have to run again. Yeah, so invalid amount. So my amount must be a number and must be greater than 0. Alright, so else print withdrawal amount successful. Yeah, okay, so if I make this a positive, it's going to print withdrawal of $100 successful. Okay, so I hope this is clear enough. Alright, I hope this is clear enough. This is an if else statement. Alright, this is a function that contains an if else statement. The function takes an amount parameter. Right, I can decide not to specify the type. Right, if I do not specify the type, it means that this is going to assume a dynamic type. All right, it's going to assume a dynamic type. So if um, if amount is not a number or is less than 0, in other words, if it is a negative, in fact I should use less than 1, all right, or that's if it is a negative, all right, throw an exception from this method, just throw this, all right, else print withdrawal of the amount, whatever amount you provide here as an argument when you call this function. So withdrawal of amount successful. Okay, so this is basic exception handling. All right, and that will bring us to the end of this course. Okay, so thank you very much, and I wish you success in life and in your career as a programmer. All right, we have laid a solid foundation for programming using the Dart language. All right, so right now with the knowledge you have, you can be able to make an impact, right? You can be able to build softwares, build mobile apps, desktop apps, and even web apps using this very language. Okay, so that will bring us to the conclusion of this course. Thank you very much, and bye.